On a peaceful afternoon at the community park, 12-year-old Alex sat resting on a bench, his specialized medical backpack beside him. The device hummed quietly, regulating the artificial heart that kept him alive. Most neighbors knew about Alex's condition and kept a respectful distance. That's when Patricia Winters, the newly appointed property manager, marched across the lawn with her assistant Greg following close behind, clipboard in hand. Her heels dug into the soft grass as she approached Alex with a stern expression. "That equipment violates community guidelines," she announced, pointing at his backpack. "Section 12B clearly prohibits oversized items in common areas." "But ma'am, this is my heart device," Alex explained quietly. "I need it to." "Rules are rules." Patricia cut him off coldly. "Greg, please secure the unauthorized item." Greg reached for the backpack, his fingers gripping the vital straps. 63-year-old William Montgomery sat on a bench 30 feet away, partially obscured by a flowering dogwood. His weathered hands held the day's newspaper, but his sharp eyes had already shifted to observe the confrontation unfolding nearby. 3 decades of military service had trained him to notice details others missed. William noted the medical alert bracelet on Alex's wrist and the telltale hum of advanced medical equipment. He recognized the specialized backpack design, similar to ones he'd seen during his final deployment, where he'd overseen medical evacuations of wounded soldiers. This wasn't some ordinary bag. It was life support equipment. He observed Patricia's body language, the rigid posture, the performative authority, the kind of bureaucratic confidence that came from rules rather than wisdom. Her assistant Greg seemed uncomfortable but compliant, the hallmark of someone following orders without questioning their purpose. William folded his newspaper deliberately, watching as Greg reached for the backpack. He noticed Alex's face drain of color, the boy's thin fingers clutching protectively at the device's straps. The boy's breathing was already labored, a sign his condition was serious. Most concerning to William was a medical warning label clearly visible on the backpack side, bold red letters stating critical medical equipment. Do not remove. Patricia had positioned herself at an angle where she could conveniently ignore this warning. William had seen this type of situation before. People wielding small amounts of power without regard for consequences. In his military career, he'd learned that the most dangerous decisions were often made by those who believed rules superseded common sense. He shifted his weight forward, muscles tensing automatically. The property manager's hand was now directing Greg to forcibly remove the backpack despite Alex's protests. The boy looked frightened, his voice growing weaker as stress visibly affected his condition. William had seen enough. This wasn't just a policy violation. It was potentially life-threatening. With the measured calm that had guided him through combat situations, he made his decision to intervene. William rose from the bench with the fluid economy of movement that decades of military discipline had ingrained in him. He covered the distance to Alex's bench in seconds, arriving just as Greg's hands were about to yank the medical backpack away. "At ease," William said, his voice carrying the natural authority of a commanding officer. He positioned himself between Greg and the boy, not aggressively, but with unmistakable purpose. "Sir, this doesn't concern you," Patricia said, irritation flashing across her face. William smiled politely but didn't move. "I'm William Montgomery, retired colonel, U.S. Army Medical Command." He wasn't one to throw around his rank, but experience had taught him when it could save time, and in this case, possibly a life. "With all due respect, sir," Patricia continued, her tone suggesting no respect at all, "we're enforcing community guidelines that clearly state." "I understand the importance of guidelines," William interrupted calmly. "I've written a few myself, including medical evacuation protocols that save hundreds of lives." He gestured to Alex's backpack. "What you're about to remove is an LVAD system, left ventricular assist device. It's not a backpack. It's essentially an external heart pump." William turned slightly toward Greg, noting his hesitation. "Son, you see that warning label? In the military, we have a saying, red means stop. Always." Greg's hand withdrew slightly from the backpack. William continued, his voice level but carrying enough to attract the attention of nearby park goers. "During my last deployment, I supervise medical transportation for soldiers with similar devices. Disconnection without proper medical supervision can cause cardiac arrest within seconds. 3. Intervention action, 540 words, Part 2. Patricia straightened her blazer, visibly recalibrating her approach. Colonel, I appreciate your concern, but this is a matter of community policy. The regulations clearly state. Ma'am, William cut in, his tone respectful but firm. I serve under 6 presidents, and one thing remained constant across all administrations. No regulation supersedes a right to life. He knelt beside Alex, who was looking pale and anxious. How are you doing, son? My heart rate alarm is going off, Alex whispered, showing William the monitor on his device that was flashing yellow. William nodded understanding and looked up at Patricia. We need medical assistance. Now. Patricia hesitated, but something in William's steady gaze, the look of a man who had stared down far more intimidating adversaries, made her step back. Greg, call 911, she finally instructed. As Greg made the call, William turned his full attention to Alex, drawing on his military medical training. Deep breaths, son. Try to stay calm. I'm going to stay right here with you until help arrives. A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the confrontation. William used their presence strategically. Is anyone here a doctor or nurse? He called out. A woman stepped forward. I'm a cardiac nurse at Memorial. Perfect, William said. Would you mind taking a look at his readings? I'd appreciate a second opinion. As the nurse knelt to check the device, William turned back to Patricia, lowering his voice. Ma'am, I understand you're doing your job, but leadership isn't about rigidly enforcing rules. It's about understanding when exceptions are necessary. In the military, we call it command discretion. The best leaders know when to exercise it. His words carried no anger, just the weight of experience. It was the same tone he'd used with young lieutenants who needed guidance rather than reprimand. The crowd around them had grown. Neighbors who recognized Alex were murmuring disapprovingly, and several had their phones out, recording the scene. Patricia became increasingly aware of the public relations disaster unfolding around her. I was simply following the Homeowners Association guidelines, Patricia insisted, her voice losing its earlier confidence. The rules clearly state that oversized equipment in common areas. Sometimes the most important rules aren't written down, William replied evenly. He stood at parade rest, hands clasped behind his back, a posture that commanded attention without aggression. In 30 years of military service, I learned that good leadership means putting people before paperwork. A distinguished-looking older woman pushed through the crowd. I'm Eleanor Jenkins, chair of the community board, she announced, taking in the scene with a frown. What's happening here? Before Patricia could speak, several neighbors called out explanations. Eleanor listened, her expression darkening. Patricia, Eleanor said firmly, did you attempt to remove medical equipment from this child despite the warnings? I was enforcing Section 12B, Patricia began defensively, by potentially endangering a child's life. Eleanor cut in. William stepped forward. If I may, ma'am, in the military we had a principle, mission first, but people always. Rules exist to protect people, not to put them at risk. Patricia looked from William to the crowd to her boss, finally recognizing the gravity of her mistake. The clipboard in her hand seemed to grow heavier. I didn't realize how serious. She stammered. Greg, who had been standing silently, suddenly spoke up. I tried to tell you it looked like medical equipment. Ms. Winters, when we received the complaint, I mentioned the warning labels. Patricia's face flushed as she realized her assistant was distancing himself from her actions. Perhaps, William suggested quietly, this is an opportunity to review how community rules are applied to residents with medical needs. The ambulance sirens could be heard in the distance as Patricia finally nodded. Her authority effectively dissolved. The paramedics arrived promptly, their efficient movements reminiscent of military precision as they checked Alex's vital signs and stabilized his device. Lucky someone knew what this was, the lead paramedic commented, nodding appreciatively toward William. Quick thinking prevented a serious incident. Eleanor Jenkins, the community board chair, had been conferring with other residents. She approached Patricia, speaking just loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Patricia, please return to the office and clear out your desk. Your employment with our community is terminated, effective immediately." Patricia appeared about to protest, then thought better of it and walked away stiffly, leaving Greg standing awkwardly with his clipboard. "Greg," Eleanor continued, "please join me at the office later. We need to discuss proper training for staff regarding medical accommodations." A car screeched to a halt at the park entrance, and a man in his 40s rushed toward them. "Alex," he called out, his face tight with worry. "Dad." Alex looked up from the gurney, where paramedics were monitoring him. Alex's father reached the group, immediately checking his son's condition before looking up at William with questioning eyes. This gentleman intervened when the property manager tried to remove Alex's LVD pack. Eleanor explained, "William Montgomery." William introduced himself simply, extending his hand. "Michael Reynolds," Alex's father replied, gripping William's hand firmly. "They called me at work, said there was an incident with Alex's heart equipment." His voice trembled slightly. "What happened?" Eleanor quickly explained the situation while the paramedics continued to monitor Alex. Michael's expression hardened. "This is exactly why I specialize in medical rights law," he said. "Too many people think rules override medical necessities." He turned to William. "Thank you. If you hadn't been here..." William shook his head. "Just glad I noticed in time." Eleanor stepped forward. "Mr. Reynolds, on behalf of the community board, I want to personally apologize. This never should have happened. I assure you we'll be implementing new policies immediately." "Actually," Michael said, "I'd like to help draft those policies. I've done similar work for other communities. We'd welcome your expertise." Eleanor agreed readily. The paramedics announced they wanted to take Alex to the hospital for a thorough check of his device. As they prepared to load him into the ambulance, Alex looked at William. "Sir, thank you for helping me." William smiled. "You hang tough, soldier. That's a mighty important mission you're carrying out." After the ambulance departed with Michael accompanying his son, residents lingered, approaching William to thank him. Several shared stories of their own struggles with overzealous enforcement of community rules. Eleanor addressed the gathered neighbors. "This incident has revealed a serious flaw in our community's approach. Starting tomorrow, we'll establish a medical needs registry and sensitivity training for all staff." She gestured toward William. "And we have Colonel Montgomery to thank for showing us what true leadership looks like in a crisis." The impromptu gathering had the feeling of community awakening to a problem that had been present but unaddressed. Where there had been disconnection, there was now solidarity forming around a shared value: compassion over compliance.